Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Post creepy stories. Interactions you had with imaginary friends. I had an imaginary friend named Chester who lived down the drain. It didn't matter what drain, he lived down the mall. He was very small and hated it when people cleaned dishes or took showers. I refused to take showers at times because I didn't want to drown Chester. I remember one time in particular. As a kid, my parents worked on a farm and sometimes I'd be left home alone for most of the day. Anyway, one day alone I heard Chester talking with me down the kitchen drain. Our usual conversations are just him listening to me talk about my day. But sometimes he'd ask about what it was like outside. He said that he had always lived down the drain. But that day, he wanted out. He asked me to pull him out of the drain. I thought it was a good idea. I wanted people to see Chester. So I reached my hand down the drain. He says he'll grab one of my fingers and he'll pull me up. Well, while my fingers are down the drain, I hear this revving sound and immediately snatch my hand out of the drain. One of my fingers was bleeding. The garbage disposal had gone off, and if I hadn't pulled my hand out, my fingers would have been sliced off. Chester would talk with me after that. He'd say I almost had him. I never talked back to him and I never got near any drains if I could help it. Eventually, I just stopped thinking about it and he stopped talking.
Before I get to the actual story, I'll describe my childhood home, because it's important. Like OP, I grew up on a farm, but not the kind of farm most people imagine, with huge pastures and barns and horses. I lived on a chicken farm. Basically, there are these long buildings filled to the brim with chickens. I used to help my parents there. I'd go through the building and push the eggs onto a belt that would take it to the front of the building where the eggs would be packaged and kept in a freezer. Sometimes we'd find dead chickens and would have to throw them out. It was a really disgusting job, but when that's all you know. I was homeschooled as well, you think it's normal. I have a lot of fucked up stories involving chickens and some paranormal shit too, but that's a different topic. I only have one negative memory associated with my imaginary friend though, so I'll keep this short. I named him Koopa. At the time, I had been playing the Paper Mario game released on the N64. It was one of the few games I had as a kid. Anyway, Koopa and I would always adventure through the woods around my house. One day, he asked me to follow him off my usual track. I find a bunch of junk along the way, rusted out push lawn mowers and a lot of dog bones. Eventually, I start smelling this wretched, putrid smell. I want to go back, but Koopa urges me on. I find myself at a 100 feet area filled with chicken shit. I almost vomited. I had never thought about what happened to all that chicken shit, but now I knew. It was fucking disgusting. There were some small trees, but chicken shit everywhere around them. The only thing I really remember after that was Koopa laughing like crazy. I ran back home and told my parents. Apparently, there are multiple shit pits in different sections of the farm. I never thought about Koopa again. We moved away when I was a teenager. Brought up Google Maps and I found a decent photograph. Pic related, my house in red.
I have had a plethora of strange experiences in my life. In this instance, I will start with the earliest one that I remember. I had an active imagination as a kid. I had imaginary friends that I would talk to, even when I was around actual people. I can account for all of these imaginary friends as normal. I mean, they were either characters from TV shows or cartoons that I would watch, so I consider them normal. All except one. This is what I remember. I was very young and had been sick with a fever and cold. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I was young enough that I was wearing pajama onesies with the built-in socks at the feet. I was being carried up the stairs by my aunt and was telling her to hurry up or the Cookie Monster thing will get us. The Cookie Monster is a real character from a kid's show, but it was not the real Cookie Monster that I was afraid of. I called it Cookie Monster because this thing I would see on had very similar eyes to the Cookie Monster. It was the only way I could describe it with my limited vocabulary at the time. It looked like a long hand puppet with a white shirt that would billow and ripple because it had no torso. I could stretch and grow to different lengths. Its arms were like metal rods that could extend out quickly and strike me in a way similar to a snake bite. It would always slap me open, palmed or with 2 fingers. Index and pointer. The hands had on white gloves just like Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse. The head was perfectly rounded just like a beach ball. It had curly hair that would change color from orange to blue. Its face was painted white and it had a mouth which would twist and contort in very terrifying ways as it would hit me. The eyes bulged out of the head and moved on their own just like the googly eyes on kids' toys or puppets. I remember my aunt giggled because she thought I was being cute, but this thing was actually very terrifying to me. Then it struck. It would always pop out of the walls from the cracks of the trim or the drywall. And it would always poke me very, very hard. So hard that it would cause a massive and sudden twitch or spasm from me that would make my whole body jerk suddenly. It would always leave me sore where it hit me, and often with cramped muscles. I would cry and complain about this thing hitting me, but as you could guess, this only got me scolded for making up fibs. So I stopped talking about it. I have one very distinct memory of lying in my bed and having this thing pop up from in between the bed and the wall. It would kind of slither upwards. It cocked back and swung at me with not a closed fist, but with 2 fingers, index and middle, and it struck me harder than ever before right in the armpit. My aunt happened to be about 20 feet away at the time. She was blow-drying her hair before school. She screamed in horror and ran out of the room. I remember her telling my grandparents and my mom that I should be seen by a doctor because, and I quote, he literally flew out of that bed like something pushed him. I remember her words exactly. I was never taken to a doctor, and the incident was never discussed again. I got a bit older and eventually the thing stopped popping out of walls and hitting me. But I did have a recurring dream for many years in which I would try to escape from the creature. It would always take place in the same second-story bedroom, and it would always end the same way. I would figure a way out of the room window and end up on the lawn below. I would stare up at the window and the creature would stare back in a calm, confident way. Not angry I had escaped, but confident that this chase would happen again, and it would definitely get me next time.
I had 3 imaginary friends growing up. Their names were Michael, Rainbow, and In a Mood. Seriously. So I would always play with my 3 friends, but one day my mom heard me throwing a fit. So she came into the living room just in time to see me yelling and "Don't come back," and slamming the front door as hard as I could. She asked what was wrong, and I explained In a Mood had been bad and murdered Rainbow. And so he was no longer my friend. I was like 4 and my imaginary friends killed each other.
Okay, X. In advance, I apologize if my English is not very good, but I'd like to comment on some experiences, not mine but my friends, about imaginary friends. I'd like you to comment on some stories related or some possible explanation to this.
It all began around when I was 2 years old. My first memory about them was being in my room watching the Backyardigans, and suddenly I was talking with both. My mom always watched how I used to talk with them and about them. They were 2. Venus and Corbyn. Venus was a girl 2 years older than me. She was red-haired, green-eyed, and many freckles in her face and arms. She always wore colorful dresses with white dots. Corbyn was a black boy a year older than me. His eyes were big and brown. His hair was curly and spongy. He used to wear a t-shirt that was very striking because of its colors. I'll talk about it later. Venus and Corbyn always used to help me to do my homework, besides I spent all day with them. Something curious about them is that when the sleepy time arrived, they went to their homes. They always said that their homes were close to mine. Last time I saw them was when I was 10 or 11 years old. That happened when I went to a volley entertainment, and I told them to stay in my room cause I'd be back for them in approximately 2 hours. When I returned, I felt that I was forgetting something, but at that moment, I couldn't understand what I was forgetting. After resting a bit, I asked my grandma if she had seen my imaginary friends, since she was the only one that understood my situation. She told me that obviously she couldn't watch them, but that maybe they would return later. I let that topic aside since everybody said that was because I had matured. I've never met someone else that have had imaginary friends, and if they had so they do not remember them as well as me. Something else that is worth mentioning is that 2 years ago, talking with my dad, he asked how they looked, then I explained to him how they looked, as I described before. I described to him the Corbyn's t-shirt. This one was exactly purple and yellow, so he told me that the description sounded like the t-shirt of the Lakers, and I didn't know it. I don't know anything about basketball, and the fact that Corbyn used to wear that uniform surprises me. Currently, I'm an adult and still can't explain how I'm able to remember it so well.
I should add that the country where she lives is a country that has very little racial variety. You can't see black people on the street just because there is not. Plus, I remember her telling me that her imaginary friends had last names. If this thread continues, I might ask her more about it.
I had an imaginary friend, but it wasn't a massive deal or story. I think it's worth investigating similarities between your friend and I. Personality-wise, though, I remember mine very faintly. It feels like I saw him less and less as time went on, but I still felt his presence despite that. He had shaggy brown hair and was white, somewhat similar to me in appearance. His name was Wilbur. I remember I'd set aside chairs, spaces for him in class. Grade kindergarten to grade 1, I think, and play games with him at home. I also had an elaborate fantasy world made up, which persisted and I continued using until I was in my early teens. He factored into it faintly but disappeared over time. Questions for you, OP. What was her personality like? What was her upbringing like? What was her family life like? Divorced parents, etc. Was she, her family, religious? A creative person? Have a childhood fantasy world, etc. Any trauma?
OP here again. Answering your questions, I can say that. Her personality is very kind, friendly, and empathetic. She's studying psychology. That hasn't changed since she was young. I don't know her for a long time, but from what she and other friends of her tell me, I know that she has been like that since youth. Her upbringing was very normal, but lonely too. She told me that she used to spend a long time alone and her imaginary friends used to spend time with her. She told me that they even used to help her with homework. Her parents aren't divorced. She has a sister with who she's close, but she's 7 years older. She is not too religious. She grew up as Catholic, but currently she is not too close to church and she has many doubts about it. Yeah, she is creative in some way, but she didn't used to put her imaginary friends in an imaginary world, but in the real world in daily situations. She doesn't have any trauma, as far as I know.
Kinda. His name was Dragsna. He was a dragon snake man because I was clever like that. And I invented him just because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. There was no real attachment to him. If I had a real imaginary friend, it was in my early 20s when I was having a schizophrenic breakdown. I had another self named Aquarion, but that was less playful and more pseudo-spiritual. It was more of a manifestation of my god complex where I would seek divine guidance from him. I suppose I unintentionally made a topo without being aware of the concept. I was not in a good place at the time and it's kinda painful to think about.
Might as well post my imaginary friend. As a kid, between the ages of probably around 5 and 10, I had an imaginary friend called Mr. Nobody. He was invisible when I was awake, but I could sense his presence as well as see him in dreams. In dreams, he was a tall, shadowy figure, all black, with a hat. Pick related, he looked pretty much exactly the same. Now, before I hit about 12, my childhood was completely fine. No trauma, no reason to create an imaginary friend that I was genuinely scared of. But Mr. Nobody was just that. I was afraid to go into my primary school bathrooms because I thought he'd be in one of the stalls, waiting to attack me when I used the toilet. If anyone's interested, I'll post more about him, as well as the one other imaginary friend I had.
Be younger than 10, probably around 6. Had imaginary friend called Suzie that was basically a replica of this doll my grandma had that I wasn't allowed to touch because it was old or some shit. Pink smock, straw hat, all that typical dolly stuff. Imaginary friend obsessed with playing. I kept a game diary in a notebook that I kept down my grandma's that detailed all the games we played every time I was there. Suzie only appeared at my grandma's. Books full up with pages and pages of today I played blank. One day I decide I'm brave enough to touch the doll cause my grandma is downstairs doing her crosswords and other old lady stuff so she wouldn't know. Get it down from the cupboard it's hidden in. Only have it out for like a minute before I become paranoid that it's going to tell my grandma somehow. Go home feeling guilty as shit. Suzie telling me that I've done a bad thing cause I was supposed to play with her. Not the doll. One day I went back over to grandma's and she's pissed at me. Doll got outside, found it in the garden a few days after I took it out. Don't know how the fuck it got outside cause the cupboard it was in locks with one of those sliding bolts and I put her back exactly where she was in locked the cupboard. Show grandma my game book to prove that I was playing with Suzie all day. She doesn't care, still tells me off. Freak out, wipe Suzie from my mind. Make up another imaginary friend I can take places other than my grandma's. Call him too cause I was shit at making names. Basically the complete opposite from Suzie. Really tall humanoid with long metal fingers for helping me with finger knitting apparently. I learned how to finger knit from this old book, and I'd just sit and make tiny scarves all day. Had a really big smile, so when he talked it'd be like the Canadians from South Park or Pac-Man or something. Not allowed to talk to him about Suzie or he'd eat me. Be near Halloween sometime after the doll incident. Remember that it was a Sunday because my Nana was at my house, which she used to do for Sunday's dinner, and that my grandma and great-auntie Noreen. Old people names, I'll tell you what, were there as well. In garden with Dad listening to one of my favorite songs at the time, Rush Fly By Night, on a CD player. Only liked it because he'd play it all the time in the car and because it had an owl on the front of the album. Dad leaves for football at about 12. Go for a nose around the sitting room. All the women chatting and drinking tea. Go sit next to my ma'am. Start talking about music. Ask me what music I like. Too embarrassed to say out loud for some reason. Whisper Fly By Night to my ma'am. She laughs really loud and exclaims to everyone that I like my dad's music. She was into tuneless 80 seconds music and all that crap, so anything with a drumbeat was awful to her. Somehow everyone finds this funny too, and they all start laughing. Go to my room and don't come down the rest of the day. Bedtime arrives, and by the time it's pitch black I'm still bummed out about what happened. Conjure up to talk to him about it. Ask him what's wrong with the song. Shrugs, even though I can't see him. I just know he's there and that he shrugged. Tell him all about owls until I get sleepy. Last thing I hear from him before I go to sleep is something like keep an eye out for those owls. Sometime after that I get a stuffed Hedwig toy, overjoyed because it's a snowy owl. After that I get a calendar from my Auntie Carol with owls for every month. The month of my birthday has a snowy owl on. Then, the main thing I remember is this rubber snowy owl toy that just appeared out of nowhere. But I took it everywhere. Only a small thing, little bigger than my hand from wing to wing. The wings were outstretched. Tell Two about it. He says to look after it or it'll fly away forever. Remember taking it to my Auntie Denise's house to play with while my shitty bratty cousins were there too. Loved that thing so much. Sit on my dad's shoulders and make it peck his ear for shits and giggles. He'd steal it and make it peck me back. All those typical kid things you do with your favorite toy. Now I have no idea where it is or where it came from. Everybody I ask about it denies that I ever owned a little rubber owl toy. Shit scared of spiders for ages following the Thirsty the Spider incident. Out playing one summer, sitting on my best friend's doorstep with drinks cause it was hot for us tiny tots out there. See a cute little spider crawling up my glass of juice. Name him Thirsty because, as you can tell, I'm the best when it comes to original names. Spiders never fazed me before this unless they were huge, which we rarely got where I live, so I was pretty neutral toward them. Finished with my drink anyway, pour some on the doorstep and help the spider down off the glass. Me and friend watching him drink the juice. Starts to crawl away towards the door. Friend's door had a large gap underneath it before it connected with the doorstep we were sitting on. As Thirsty gets closer to the gap, two enormous spider legs shoot out from the darkness and grab him, then pull him inside. Me and my friend tactically shit our pants and propel ourselves away from the door. Friend's ma'am hears our screams and comes out to see if we're all right. Friend explains what happened with Thirsty and the big spider. Only when I looked back, I didn't see spider legs grab Thirsty. I saw Two's long, metal fingers. Convinced myself that it was a giant spider. Don't go round friends for about a month after that. Start crying when I get home because I'm sad the little spider got killed. Ma'am tells me it was just a horrible dirty spider, and that I shouldn't care. Dad says pretty much the same thing. Talk to Two about it when it gets dark. He says that the little spider probably did something bad to deserve it, like stealing my drink. Even more scared of spiders now because I think they're all out to get my drinks and jump at me from gaps between doors. Two laughs, says they're only spiders and they can't do anything but crawl on me, but they might get into my ears at night. Start seeing spiders at night, which is what I always described that thing where it's dark, but you can still see outlines of things, and if you stare at one spot for ages the darkness turns into tiny blobs of darkness and starts scuttling around the wall. Fear building up to the point where I have to have a bug net put up around my bed. Have nightmares about spiders drowning me. Two would sometimes be in the nightmares as a giant spider with more of his long arms springing out at me from the darkness. Dad is getting pissed that he has to come into my room and calm me down nearly every night because of me waking up crying. Tell Two that I'm not scared of him. I don't know what I'm talking about. Tell him that he needs to stop getting into my dreams and that I'm not scared of spiders anymore. Says that's better. Never saw spiders at night again. No longer scared of spiders. Actually, I have a tarantula and plan on getting another next month. Rip in peace, Thirsty. At a birthday sleepover with one of the more popular kids at school. Not sure why they invited me, but whatever. As soon as I got there, I knew it was a huge mistake. Almost turned around and got back in my car the second I set foot in the door. Kids are all at least twice the size of me. Even if I was small for my age, they were tall kids. Some of them I didn't even know. Awkwardly sit around while they play games and talk about shit I hadn't a clue about. When it's time to go to sleep, I choose the floor of my friend's room as opposed to sharing the tiny bunk bed with these Godzilla kids. Feel homesick pretty much all night until my friend and the sentient skyscrapers start talking real loud. Get kind of upset that they don't even try to talk to me, but kind of relieved. Talk to Two in my head. He could still reply even if I wasn't physically moving my mouth to talk. He's cramped up in the corner of this tiny-ass room, his long legs and arms comically sticking up so he could sit down. Tell him I want to go home. He says I could just get up and go if I wanted to because my friend wasn't really my friend and probably laughs at me behind my back anyway. Ask why they'd even invite me.
Same reason you watch Arthur.
I'm sure you all know that shitty fucking cringeworthy TV program Arthur that was on TV every fucking morning before school about that smug-looking aardvark or whatever with his dumbass jam jar glasses. I hated that shit so damn bad, but I couldn't stop myself watching it because it was just so bad I had to see what they'd try and pull to get kids interested in yay. The fucking library. So damn fun, holy shit, I love learning. Reading is cool. Look at what the power of being kind to your friends does. Anyway, stop talking to Two when I hear footsteps coming toward the room. Friend's ma'am comes in and tells them off for being so loud, cause friend's little brother's asleep in the room down the hall. Two gets this horrible, wide grin when she leaves. One of those faces you imagine in your head, and it's so awful it legitimately scares you and gives you a chill. Couple of minutes later, I hear this kid scream. Friend jumps out of bed and rushes to see what's going on. All of us leave the room to see as well. Little brother blubbering and crying after having a nightmare so raw he fell off the bed. What he describes freaks us all out to the point where some of friend's giraffe descendant guests decide they're going home and call their parents to pick them up. I don't remember exactly what the dream was. It was just something disturbing. Friend's ma'am asks if I'm going home too. Say yes. Use her phone to call my ma'am to pick me up. She's pissed cause it's like 11 at night, but I go home anyway. Tell Two about what happened. He laughs this weird, low-pitched laugh, kind of like that laugh you hear in Five Nights at Freddy's. The only thing I know I can compare it to. I got kinda scared but still happy I got to go home, thinking about that laugh all night because it freaked me out the more I thought about it. It's all coming back to me now. Gonna try and keep this thread alive with anything else I can remember cause I think imaginary friend stories are really interesting. Be it practically other side of the country to visit my older cousin Louise. Staying at her house for a couple of days with her, my little sister, my ma'am, my auntie Denise and her grandkid, whom I'll refer to as a cousin as well to avoid making it too complicated, Brandon. Louise has a cat called Maggie that I really liked. All of us have to sleep in one spare room. It's pretty big so I don't mind, but I have to share a bed with my ma'am and Brandon. Little sister gets to sleep in Louise's room. Denise is on an airbed on the floor. Can't sleep, really want to play with Maggie. Door is shut so she can't come in and claw people's faces climbing on the bed and all that jazz. Initiate ninja mode and climb out of my place between Brandon and my ma'am, who I remember was snoring and the reason I couldn't sleep. Clamber out of bed and get over Denise without making so much as a sound. Stealthily open the door. Cat is on the landing as usual. PSS. Noise my dad makes to get cats to approach him works for me. Maggie follows me into the room. Traverse the obstacle course of sleeping aunties and airbs. Bring Maggie onto the bed. Pet her while I try to get to sleep. Brandon lifts his fucking leg up in his sleep and shoves the cat. She jumps off the bed and goes to the door. Think something like no. Stop her or don't let her leave. As Maggie slips out of the door that I must have forgotten to close, there's this god-awful hissing from the landing and she comes shooting straight back in. Skids across the wooden floor and makes a ton of noise running around the room. Scares the shit out of me and I'm practically slapping my ma'am awake in my shock. Denise wakes up. She's this really, really loud auntie whose whispering voice is equivalent to that of an opera singer whose audience is 8 miles away.
What's ganning on here like? The bloody cat's gone mental.
Louise comes running in, tries to calm the cat down and take her out, but Maggie's fused herself to the bed. Maggie won't leave the bedroom for the rest of the night. Keep saying thanks in my head because I get to pet her now. Secretly know it was Two who scared her back into the room for me, but never mention him because I wanted to look cool in front of Brandon, and having an imaginary friend at like 8 or 9 this must have been. Would have been babyish. Funnily enough, my next story has something to do with animals as well. I don't even know if anybody's even still reading these, but whatever. I want to get them off my chest now that there's a thread for them. Inherit this raggy old cockatiel from my Auntie Carol. Same one that I got the calendar from when she died. Didn't know her that well. She lived with Louise, so I only saw her maybe once every few years. Bird is called Birdy. Amazingly thought out names seem to be a running theme in these stories. The night we bring him home, I'm real excited to tell Two all about him, cause it'd be like having my own fly-by-night owl. Sounds really grumpy. Says stuff like, well, it's not an owl and it's an ugly old bird. Just remember him generally being in a mood that night for some reason, because I remember that day almost perfectly, it being one of the best days of my life for little me to be getting an actual bird as a pet. Be a Sunday. Nana comes up to my house, but instead of having dinner at mine, we go to this restaurant called Brewer's Fayre. Someone left Birdie's cage open because when we came back he was perched on the top of one of the couches. Shit all over the cushions and floor and running down the back of the chairs. Feathers practically covering the carpet. Looked more like he'd had a fight than just flying around. Brand new cage. The door has to be pulled upwards and hooked onto this little loop thing on the roof to stay open. I get blamed because I was obsessed with the bird a few days before we brought him home. No way it was my dad, because he was out at football until about 10 minutes or so after we came back. He hates the bird with a burning passion. It's still alive to this day despite being about 300 years old, and I'm sure it's only clinging on to life to piss my dad off. Rare one with both Two and Suzie, after I kind of forgot about her for ages. Probably one of the few actually scary encounters I had with my imaginary friends. Sleeping over best friend's house in summer holidays. Friend's room is literally the size of a fridge. Have to shimmy past the wardrobe that's directly in front of the doorway to get in. Even then there's like half a square meter to move around in. Sit reading fact books and trying to out-weird each other with the weirdest ones we could find. We were saddos, don't hate. Until it's time to go to bed. Friend brings in this little camping bed from brother's room. They sleep on it on the floor. I take the bed. Mirror, full length on the wardrobe, perfectly aligned to where my head is on the bed. Hate sleeping in the same room as a mirror in case I look into it and there's something spooky there. Middle of night, can't sleep because of mirror. Glance at friend on floor, who is facing the mirror. Looks like a corpse. Literally looks like a body, drained of blood, sunken eyes and rotting skin lying there on the floor. Silently flip my shit and clamp my eyes shut for a good 5 minutes. Open eyes. Friend isn't even facing the mirror. Freak out even more and try to wake them up so I can get past them and turn the light on. Waggle hand down the side of the bed. Hand brushes something and I peek down and see it's a fucking porcelain doll hidden in one of the little alcoves under the bed amongst all my friends' paper and old toys and stuff, facing up at me since I knocked it out of place. Nearly fall face down on friend but manage to avoid flattening them and waking them up. Get back into bed and face the wall trying to calm myself down. Trying to summon Two to help me get over my shit fit. Tells me it's just a doll, and that I'm going to wake my friend up if I don't stop being a baby. Yeah, but it reminds me of Suzie. Two goes silent. Probably me not being able to subconsciously think of a reply. Get Ring Around the Rosies being sung in this little girl's voice stuck in my head all night because I thought of Suzie. Something that popped into my head last night when I was having a think about any other stuff with Suzie. Two was the fact that Two would sometimes sing. Not to me, just whenever there'd be a song that he liked, he'd be in the room it was coming from. Like if it was a radio or a CD player or something, and singing along to it. Some songs he liked that I can remember off the top of my head were Journey, Don't Stop Believing. The Follow Your Heart song from Don Bluth's Thumbelina. Even though he didn't like the film. Johnny Cash, A Boy Named Sue. If I ever went in and caught him singing, he'd get mad and stop upon realizing I was listening. Not really spooky, just something I remembered that people might find funny.
I got to split for now. We'll be back in an hour or two. Is this close? Rough sketch, of course.
Playing out with some friends. Just chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool, and sitting on the swings at the park near the school. Start swinging really high. high as I can go. All the other kids in awe of my swinging abilities. Little shitty chavvy kids come into the park and come over to where I'm swinging. Always pester me because my sister is friends with them. Almost 360ing over the bars of the swing at this point. One of the chav kids wanders about on the tarmac in front of the swing. Tell her to move. Shit doesn't register. Collide with her head and she goes flying back. Run my little ass straight out of there, over the fence and straight back home. Put the hoodie I was wearing in my drawers and never touch it again in case I get recognized by anyone who saw me knock a kid out with a swing. Don't tell my parents about it. Shit scared they're going to march me over to the kid's house and squeal on me face to face with her ma'am. Quiet all day. Go to bed with guilt weighing me down like a rock even if I disliked the kid. I felt bad. I've done something bad. I've done a horrible thing I tell to. Or something similar that makes him interested. Tell him, in my head in case my parents overhear, what I'd done. Won't give me a straight answer on what I should do. My thoughts are so muddled cause it was the first time I'd done something this bad so I can't hear him properly. The one thing I managed to make out is maybe it'll sister should know. Maybe I'll tell her. Two hardly ever even acknowledged my sister. It was weird because she never had any imaginary friends at all so she never understood what I meant when I'd mentioned Two or Suzie. Tell him that she can't even see or hear him. Gets confused, always assumed up until now that people could see him. But he never gave a shit so he just ignored everyone but me for some reason. Feel like I hurt his feelings. Try and make it up by saying he can tell my sister what I did. Must have had an existential crisis, or something because I remember not seeing him for about a week. Finally pluck up the courage to tell my sister what happened to her friend. Oh, it's okay, I kind of hate her, haha. Two back to normal after I got the weight off my shoulders and told her. Never got in trouble. Dad kinda laughed after finding out because the kids piss him off. Ma'am just like, well, I hope you apologize next time you see her, tut tut. Can't help but feel like Two somehow told them beforehand so they were all so chilled about it when I owned up to it. Just grins when I ask if he managed to tell my sister. Thanks to you got me out of some deep shit I would have been in that time. One of my worst days, but one of the most memorable. Riding bike around the little path outside my house one Sunday, again. Go around the corner and hit these two teenagers riding their much bigger bikes. Fall off bike, hit head on floor pretty bad but think little of it since the teenagers just say sorry and ride off. Go into garden so I can rest for a bit cause my head hurts. Ma'am sitting on a garden chair suddenly leaps up and starts yelling and grabs me. Split my head open and didn't even notice cause the blood was running down the back of my head rather than the front where I would have felt it. Freak out, ma'am gets a cold tea towel and tells me to hold it tight to my head while she calls my dad to come home from football. Gets home quick cause the sports place is close to where we live. Get driven to a walk-in center while keeping the towel on my head. Doctor's room is small so only my ma'am can come in with my while I get my head glued back together. Yeah, I got some weird gluey stuff put on the injury cause it wasn't bad enough for stitches or something. Really scared while the doctor sits to one side of me and my ma'am sits at the other. Little mirror on the shelf facing me. Try to avoid looking at it because I'd see the nasty cut and all the blood and shit. Eventually give in to my curiosity and peek into the mirror. Don't even see a lot of blood. Some in my hair but most of it was on the towel. Doctor's hands working at the cut with the gluey stuff. Two's hands working at the doctor's hands like a marionette. Can't turn around. But I can see him in the mirror sitting stooped way over the doctor using his spindly fingers to mimic the doctor's. Start laughing. Remember the exact words the doctor said. Oh, hold still, little one. I know it's a funny feeling but it'll fix you right up. Hear Two in the back of my mind in a stupid voice.
Heard her, it'll fix you right up.
Parents still worried about my laughing fit I had while I was getting glued back together.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.